So this story in Luke 15 is one of the most well-known parables of Jesus. Of course, to say something is well-known does not necessarily mean that it is known well, or in a way that actually makes a difference in our lives. Did you know that the purpose of parables is to push us and provoke us? They challenge us to look at hidden aspects in our lives, to see what lies below the surface. A lot of times they ask questions, and sometimes they reveal answers that maybe we knew, but we weren't ready to acknowledge. Unlike what a lot of people think, parables are not fables. That means they don't have an easily identifiable moral to the story that we're supposed to take away from them. Neither are they allegories, where we are supposed to automatically know that this character represents this and this other character represents that. Really, the term parable comes from the Greek word para, which means alongside, together with, and the word balo, which means to cast or to throw. So together, the word parable means to lay or to cast alongside. That is, parables are stories or narratives laid alongside our lives. And they invite us in, not to teach us a moral, but to activate our imaginations and maybe to ask some hard questions. Kind of like a poem, a parable will evoke numerous interpretations, and so our job is to remain open to what this parable might be saying to us today. I'm guessing that all of you probably have your own interpretations and understandings of this parable in Luke 15, which, as you probably know, is not the only parable in this chapter. The parable of the lost sons, as I like to call it, follows the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin. And it appears that in all three of these stories, what has been lost is indeed found. And there's a lot of happy hoopla afterward. The shepherd calls all of his friends and neighbors to celebrate with him when he found that one sheep out of his 100 that had been lost. The woman calls her friends and neighbors to celebrate when she finds that one silver coin out of 10 that had been lost. And a father calls a whole household together and kills a fatted calf to have a big party because he has found his lost son. See, the series of stories here that Jesus is telling, and notice that he's telling both the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious folks of the day, as well as the sinners and the tax collectors, you might say less than religious folks of the day. He's telling them these three stories that depict challenging circumstances, right? Something is lost. And they have a resolution, something is found. And that resolution warrants a celebration. Let's party. What's tricky about all of this is that when you read these three stories back to back, you can think that the third story is just as resolved as the first and second. But it's not, is it? Coins and sheep are one thing. Humans are a whole different ballgame. Especially humans that are connected as family. There's nothing more complex than family, is there? One of the reasons family relationships are so complex is because there are a lot of presuppositions and expectations, usually unspoken, that we bring to family relationships that we don't necessarily bring to other relationships in our lives. You know, family members are, quote, supposed to love one another and look after one another. We're supposed to be loyal and stick together. We're supposed to understand each other. We're supposed to be honest with each other, to be on the same page about our values and our goals and our ways of living. We're family, after all, right? Here's the thing. All of these supposed tos that we associate with family are not hardwired into our DNA, like our skin color, our facial structure, our athletic or musical ability. I mean, we can look like someone and still not love them. We can inherit talent from someone and still not share the same values and goals they do. We can talk with the same accent as someone and still not talk honestly with them. If anything, when it comes to family, we have to work harder at these relationships than any others in our lives. And often we just don't want to put in that kind of work. We don't want to be controversial or confrontational, so we become silent to, quote, keep the peace. And other times we might go off the rail and actually be harsher on those we love than we would even be to a perfect stranger. So why is this? Your guess is as good as mine. The only thing I can come up with is that we are complex. And when put in automatic relationship with one another, as opposed to chosen relationship, like a friendship, our human complexities shine in all their glory. And so this particular parable, I think, invites us to think about our own relationships within our family, our reactions and our presuppositions, our resentments, those things perhaps that we take for granted, those things that we are longing for, that we are afraid to lose, those things which are right under our nose that we overlook. We're going to look at each character in this parable and dive more deeply into their role in this family system. And there's going to be a lot of speculation on my part, but parables are meant for speculation. They are the stories in the Bible that are ripe for this kind of thinking because they invite it, they challenge us. They're not about right or wrong. They're really about trying to show us something about the kingdom of God, that is the family of God, how we're supposed to all live together. So first, the younger son. God only knows what he was thinking when he asked his dad for his share of the inheritance to go off and travel. Now, I am a younger sibling myself, and I can't speak for my older brother, but I do know this. Of the two of us, I am the one who went far away to grad school, and let me tell you, Boston, Massachusetts is pretty much a foreign country to Texans. I'm the one who's traveled all over the U.S. and to really kind of odd countries. I mean, I'm going to the Republic of Georgia in a month, after all. Who goes to the Republic of Georgia, right? I'm the one that has settled far away from home, which is pretty much heresy when you're from Texas. Why would anyone not live in the Lone Star State? So I kind of think that the younger son gets a bad rap. I empathize with this younger brother. Maybe he was a dreamer and he just wondered what life was like outside of the family farm. Maybe he had good intentions initially, like any young person who wants to take a year off and backpack around the globe or study abroad or go work at a ski resort or join the Peace Corps. I mean, we don't know this younger son's intentions when he asked for that inheritance. My guess is that he did not want to squander it all. I mean, who wants to go broke, right? That's not in anybody's plan. Families rarely talk about finances. That's one of those hush-hush things. So he may not have learned about credit card interest and how all of that works. And so something happened, and he ends up with no money, and that would have been bad enough. But then a natural disaster happens on top of that. A famine hits the land, and he's really down on his luck. The text says he began to be in need. Sometimes it's not until we realize that we can't do it all on our own that we kind of wake up in life, right? Independence is an alluring and elusive thing. It's also not how we were created to live, according to the Bible. We were created to be dependent on one another and on God. And at rock bottom, this young son recognizes his need. So he actually does something smart. He gets a job. Unfortunately, the job seems to take care of his shelter, but not food. And he's hungry. And that hunger is what drives him home. Some of you in this church, I know, have been truly hungry for food in your lives. Others of us have not experienced that literal food hunger, but we've probably been hungry for something else. A job, a relationship, a sense of self-worth, a cure, a scholarship, a win, a fresh start. a meaningful faith? Hunger creates a drive in us that we want to satiate, right? You see, hunger for something different, I think, is what led the younger brother away from home in the first place, and hunger for food and stability is what leads him back home. The grass is always greener on the other side, they say. But what if you were saying that while standing on really green grass already, but you just don't see that it's green? I mean, often it's not until we go away from something that we realize the blessing that it was or is. It doesn't take away our dreamings and our longings, but it puts them in perspective, I think, to have gratitude for what we have, and for that to be a little bit stronger than our longing for what we don't have. Then there's this older brother. If you've been the one to stick around and always do the right thing and follow the rules, a show of hands here? Oh, come on, Calvary. There's more than just 3 of you. Yeah, you know who you are. You might quickly identify. Yep, see, they're coming up. You might identify with the elder brother because he is doing what in that day was quote unquote the right thing to do. Here is what I wonder about him, though. He could have left too. Why didn't he? Loyalty seems to be taken as an untouchable virtue in a lot of families. But did you know just one chapter before this one in Luke, Jesus says, "If you come to me but will not leave your family, you cannot be my follower. You must love me more than your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, even more than your own life." The older brother may have been working his whole life for his dad, but to what end? To satisfy his father's desires, little f? What about capital F, Father? What about that father's desire? Now, if the older brother was actually taking joy in his work and this is where he felt like he should be, then that's a whole different story. But it seems like, by his response, that he kind of feels stuck here. It feels like something else is going on, right? Some anger, some resentment. Mostly, I think he is just craving some recognition for his duty and his loyalty. I mean, during this welcome home extravaganza that's going on, he says to his dad, "Listen, I've been working for you all these years and I don't even get a goat to celebrate with my friends." To me, that speaks of this deep desire to be seen, to be recognized, to be acknowledged for what he has done, even more, though, for who he is, also a beloved son. You don't have to travel the world to have an existential crisis and wonder, who am I and what is my purpose, right? I'm sure the older brother had this thought many days, and I'm sure he longed for some external validation from his dad or from others that what he was doing was the right thing. We all long for that. The hard part is nobody can give us that except God. It's not something else that, it's not something that anyone else can give us, even a beloved parent. I actually wonder if this was the first time the older brother had ever expressed to his dad his need for affirmation and acceptance and validation. If not, then this is a true breakthrough in their relationship. It speaks to the power of honesty and stating our needs. This is not something that we're often taught to do, to say to our loved ones what we need. We assume that they know, or we hope that they'll just give us what we need without really having to ask. But in reality, that's not fair of us, is it? How can we expect folks to read our minds, even our family? That only happens in scripted romantic comedies, and our lives don't have scripts. And so it seems in this case, resentment built and misunderstandings abounded, and all of a sudden, the older brother kind of expresses this to his dad, and it gives his dad a chance to say, "Whoa, that's not the case. I do love you, and my love for you does not preclude me from also loving your younger brother? The older brother's probably thinking about love as a limited commodity, as we all tend to do, right? That if somebody loves this person this much, then they have to love me a little bit less. But love is not like that. And that's a lesson that takes all of us a lifetime to unlearn, I think, that there's some kind of measurement of love. The truth about God's kingdom is that love is, and love is enough for all. And then there's the father, a guy who's just trying to be a good dad, right? There's no manual on parenthood. And just because your kids grow up and you're no longer, quote unquote, parenting them, your sons are always your sons. And so the father actually willingly gives the younger son his inheritance here. I mean, nothing in the text says that the father says no or resists it. He could have. It would have been in his right to do so. He may have even blessed this journey for his younger son. We don't know. What we do know is that at some point, the younger son had been gone long enough that the father probably started to feel some worry and anxiety and some grief. And so when his son comes walking up one day, wow, he's blown over with happiness. He embraces his son, and he wants to throw this huge party. And even if he had some things inside of him that were upset and angry with this son, that all went away in that moment of seeing that his son was there and alive. He says, "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found." And the party ensues. While he's partying, though, someone alerts him to the fact that there's another son that's outside of the party. So he goes out to find this son. What's important to know here is that there's a very tender exchange. The word for son in this text that the father says to the elder son is actually translated more accurately as child. And it's the same term that Mary uses when she and Joseph have been searching for Jesus for 3 days, when Jesus is 12. And they come into the temple, and Mary says, "Child, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." That term of tenderness is the same term that the father uses here with the older son. And he says, "Son, you are always with me, and everything that is mine is yours." It's a wonderful moment, but it's a moment from the father's point of view, because he feels like he's always been there for his son. What he doesn't realize is that his son may not feel the same way. The elder son, he may not have been literally missing, but he was missing his father's love and attention in some way or another. And so hindsight is 20/20, and it goes without saying that I'm sure this father wishes he could have done more to show his son that he appreciated him in all those ordinary moments of life. We so often take for granted those in our midst who are around us every day. We become accustomed to them being here. In the end of all this exchange and misunderstanding and honest conversation, the line that echoes in my ears in light of our Lenten theme of challenge and celebration is this: it remains necessary to cheer and to rejoice. And yet, even as he's saying this, he and the elder son are not cheering and rejoicing. They're outside of the party in the field. You see, sometimes it may be necessary to rejoice, and yet we still have challenges to work through. This parable doesn't tie anything up with a neat bow. We're left wondering what each of these people do after this moment is over, don't we? And yet, we know this, that it asks hard questions and maybe allows us to imagine our own family dynamics. Through the lens of this family, maybe we're able to ask ourselves if there's things we are missing, things we should be saying or shouldn't be saying, resentments we should let go of. There's actually not spoken overt forgiveness in this passage. It's embodied by action. and some forgiveness is left up in the air. This parable doesn't show us how to behave as much as it shows us that human behavior is vast and varied. And so in the midst of all that complexity, there is something that remains in this: God's compassion and God's welcome. People often equate the Father in this story to God, which is great, it's fine. It's not needed, though, because God is already in this story, in the person of the one who is telling it, Jesus. Jesus is the one in that moment creating that welcome with the Pharisees and the scribes, the tax collectors and the sinners, literally living out that parable right in their midst. We don't need to create an allegory out of this to see God's love. We only have to look at the one who is telling this story to see it. This is a compassion that doesn't try to tie everything together, but lets the complexities live. And Jesus' example in setting this table for some who thought that the celebration was just for them and not for others is an example, I think, that makes us pay attention to who is at any celebration we're at and who might not be. Is there anyone out in the field that we need to go tend to? You see, there's two beautiful responses of compassion in this text for both sons. He says that we have to celebrate because one son was lost and is found. And we read that we also celebrate because, child, you have always been with me, and everything I have is yours. It's not either or, it's both and.